What's going on, workforce? Brian and Chris here, and today we're actually diving into Guild Wars 2 conversations, especially as it relates to communities, toxicity, and overall the End of Dragons expansion, which still has not a release date to be spoken of. It's February, and it's almost February, so has a lot of people questioning, and I've seen a lot of comments in my community over at Ginger Prime, and that's where I was talking with Chris about it, and he had this whole extra layer of things that I hadn't considered. So, Chris, what's been going on within the Guild Wars community? Why, would you consider or not consider them more or less toxic? Because what I keep hearing is that the Guild Wars 2 community is so incredibly toxic. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I believe toxicity exists in every community, but it's usually a vocal minority that exists, out there in the weeds if you go looking for it. But what do you think?
First of all, I assume they're coming from other communities that you're a member of, which does include New World, but it also includes Final Fantasy, includes Genshin Impact, these less PvP driven games.
Yeah.
So anytime there's PvP, there's always friction, always, like by its very nature, because you are taking something from somebody else in order to win. So some of it is that like they're sitting in that content lull, they're sitting in that 0.55 lull going into the expansion, and the ArenaNet team has not been like overly communicative about like when the expansion is coming and all these things leading up to it, as opposed to most games. There's this whole press schedule where 10 weeks out you have the date and you can pre-order, and there's maybe an in-game event to celebrate it oncoming. It's been a lot more guesswork out of the ArenaNet team, and I think a lot of that comes down to their content pacing. They're not a subscription model, so they don't have to put out content for content's sake, which is a good thing, right? The advantage there is they're never just filling a patch. And there are absolutely times that WoW and 14 feel like some of the content is just, oh, that section of the mold is empty. I don't know, push something into it. Every once in a while, it just kind of feels like, especially in earlier expansions where the teams weren't as well funded, you can definitely see where it's like, this section feels a little bit forced. Guild Wars doesn't do that because they don't have to fill a mold. You just pay for what they make. The other side of that is that means that people want to consume the game do run out of things that they want to do, that they want to do, not that they can do, that they want to do. And so like I've been sitting in more Guild Wars streams, and like these are people that I typically think of as like I enjoy just listening and catching up on the game. I generally just lurk because I don't really know the game that well. I'm only like a couple hundred hours in maybe, and I don't know if they know it about themselves. I don't know if you've ever been told, like, you think you're in a good mood and somebody goes, Brian, all you've done is complain all day. And you're like, really? I feel like I'm in a great mood. And they're like, okay, but the last 10 things you said were all negative. And I'm telling you, I had to leave some of their streams because this weekend, I don't know if they realize it, but the chat and the streamer was just negative. It was just, I don't like this. And like, yeah, they're adding this class and that's really cool, but how's that going to work within the raids? It was an immediate dig at it immediately turned negative no matter what topic they brought up.
So it's interesting because just on answer that question, I would have to rely on maybe more people in the community to answer it for me, because I tend to feel like I do wear my emotions on my sleeve, so that if I'm in a bad mood, or if I'm frustrated or grumpy, like it usually is very apparent, in that regards. However, that's not to say that those situations don't exist, or I would think about myself that maybe I haven't communicated in a proper way, because sometimes like I even say something and I'll get a comment. I'm sure we all, any creator gets a comment that says like, oh my gosh, like you're absolutely wrong when you said X. And then I'm like, no, I didn't say X. I said that. And they're like, oh, okay. I missed, usually like that. And so you guys can let me know if there's ever time where I feel like I'm being positive and you're like, man, Brian is just in a mood today. I always tend to feel like I have a good feeling for that. You bring up a couple things. Content pacing. I think that's one aspect. PvP, which especially as we relate it to a community that we're like deeply in love with the Final Fantasy XIV community. Not trying to sit here and have communities butt heads, but PvP tends to be something a little bit lower down, at least prior to going into Endwalker. Feels like the PvP queues are popping.
It requires a tougher skin. Like it does. Mm-hmm. You played sports. Like it just requires a tougher skin. Mm-hmm. You just can't. Some guy talking crap on the other team, you just can't take that to heart. That's just part of it.
The other aspect, the other third pillar in my mind that I was going to ask you about in this regards is that challenging content like Savage, like raids, or like where like M plus that like content that really pushes on the player, right? Like you really kind of have that separate, you know, the casuals from the sweaties, you know, like, oh, like if you're not performing at your best all the time, there's no way we're going to clear this. And if you end up getting matched with somebody who's like, let's say doing 20 or 30% what they need to do at a bare minimum, and y'all can't clear the content, like you feel like they're wasting your time in that regard. So we've, you know, like I'm saying that 14 doesn't have, like, they have a hardcore community, but in terms of patch content cycle, back to Pillar 1, like the Savage community had to go well over a year before they got a new set of challenging content. Everybody ended up mastering it, and we saw them shift into a teaching fashion, getting more people into that style of content, which I think was really overall positive for 14's community. But do you think that the biggest issue here is more the content pacing in terms of having these long times of gaps? Because like if we're looking at the community being mad about and frustrated about the game, wanting to play more of the game, and then being told like 2017 to 2022, that's a huge gap. That like in terms of like expansion style systems, that's 5 years.
I think if there is objectively more frustration, right? Like I don't have the objective measure of how much frustration is in every game. I know it's there in every game. But let's assume for a moment we have a scientific clipboard here that says Guild Wars is at an abnormally high toxicity at the moment by some objective measure. It's probably not, but that's the talking point here. So based on that, what I would say is that the complaints in the streamers that I've sat in recently, if we're going to take that assumption, we're going to take my anecdotal evidence to back it up, is a lot of, I hate PvPing against this certain class because their skills don't require as much skill and seem to be outrageously balanced right now. And somebody in chat said, then how come you don't play that class? And this streamer said, I have played that class. I have 600 hours on that class. Pan to a different streamer. You know what I don't like about this is that when I'm leveling up a new character, these following things really bug me. It makes this not enjoyable. That was a thing said by a streamer. The answer would be, then why are you doing that type of content? And the answer was much more long-winded, but something along the lines of, because this is what I have left to do. So like the things that I saw that were being negative are the very same complaints that you and I would have if we started full clearing 14. Because at some point you would move into content that is not your favorite. And so the complaints would rise to the top a lot easier, even if you just viewed them as constructive criticism. Overall, I'm very positive to the game. Yeah. I've got 10,000 hours of positivity. Let me just have this 10 hours of like, I wish this was a little bit different. Yeah. But when somebody comes in and stays with you for 30 minutes, 50 minutes, 2 hours, and all they get is that last 10-hour section to pull from, even if they come and go throughout the day, that whole day comes across as negative.
Okay.
And I don't think it is. I think it's entirely, and they don't have enough to be excited about because they don't do PTR in the same way that WoW does. They do have like a beta style that's more beta than Final Fantasy.
We got to play some of the new class builds that already in the live game, and that's something that they were doing. So I thought that was fascinating.
But they don't do like the big events leading up to an expansion that WoW does or that 14 does in that same way. And I think a lot of it comes down to lack of practice. I think ArenaNet tries very hard. The passion on their team, any of you who ever sat through any of their live events, the passion is very, very clear. How much they care for their community, how much they are trying is very clear. I don't see anybody on those events that I don't think is proud of what they do, is staying late, you know, basically has a pillow at the office for the nights they need to, like they care for that game. But you play how you practice. And so for a game that releases an expansion every who knows, that's not really as good at practice as a game like Final Fantasy and World of Warcraft, where in theory those games can show up regularly. And you see World of Warcraft get out of practice when they have a long patch cycle. Final Fantasy's advantage is that when it came time to show up, when it came time to, we're having server issues. Wow, they communicate so well. How do they do that? Because we hear from Yoshi P 100 times a year, whether it's good or bad. We just hear from him 100 times a year. And so when he has something to say that he's sorry, when he has something to say he's excited, we have context, he has practice, and it goes a lot smoother. And so I think a lot of the communication between these, you know, the content creators and the dev team, which with ArenaNet is actually closer than it is for 14, because they have the ArenaNet partner program. Like, I think that's where some of that toxicity and negativity could be received. Because it's just, They're just guessing right now, and they're so close to another expansion, and it feels like the time you should have all of the answers. And I have yet to find anywhere that does. So if somebody does, it's not been in any of the places I've been hanging out.
Yeah, I was looking over the ArenaNet, the Guild Wars 2 site, like as promo, and I was like, yeah, because you said that they don't even have a release date. I was like, that can't, I was like, it's
last week they didn't.
Right. Well, they still haven't. Like, I was like, we're this is going to air, and then by the time, who knows, somebody watches it, like, it could be, the end of this week or next week, but we're going to be in February within, like I'm going to sneeze and it's going to be February, and you're going to be like, well, it's coming out this month. When? I have no idea. As opposed to, what's worse? Like, okay, like, hey, it's coming out in a week. Oh, wait, we got to push it back.
That
has been delayed. It has yet to be delayed. But the worst case scenario would be that it misses February, right? Like, oh, okay, now it is truly delayed. And so maybe that's essentially something they're trying to personally avoid. You bring up an interesting point about Yoshi P and his frequency in which that they communicate, because I absolutely agree. Like, it gives no room for this kind of mythos that builds up within gamers. Like, oh, the reason why this sucks is that they're just trying to farm money out of you. The reason why this is, like, you hear this over and over again. Oh, it's so fascinating that it takes 33 days to be able to complete this if you're running efficiently. That's 2 months up, like, where people start to try to analyze the breakdown and then apply some kind of like malice, thought, where I think when we had Josh Strife Hayes on the podcast, he says never contribute to malice what could be easily contributed to stupidity. And then at the same time, I was talking with Force Gaming this last week on the Epic Loot Radio, and he says it's so fascinating to him how Final Fantasy XIV, like, when you compare any other game out there in the world, that, oh, you having server issues? Great, good for you, 14. You did it. Like, way to go. Like, it's been a month and like people are still unable to log in. I'm so, like, it's like there's this sense of pride that, like, that even within this like period of suffering, that gamers are like, yeah. And
yes. Well, I don't see WoW having server issues. Is that supposed to make them look bad? Like, I don't.
Oh, it's fascinating. It's so interesting. I think Yoshi P, when you look down at a playbook, when you look down at like how Yoshi P has changed the conversation, I think 14's impact, whether you like Final Fantasy 14 or not, is already being seen within how other companies are structuring their communication and their patch rollout. And all of that, because I think essentially that is what is determined to be the bread and butter. Even if it's a patch that isn't speaking to you, just the fact that updates are coming out, communications being made, you can set a clock to it pretty much. And so that gives you the ability as a player to say, you know what, like, because I've already heard the conversation. People are already saying, hey, Brian, are you playing Lost Ark? Yes. In fact, Chris and I are going to talk about that right after this video. I'm kind of, like a Sparta within our community. He's like, I've already finished Endwalker on 2 different characters. I think I need a break. And that's like, the best news about that? Take a break. And that more content, more stuff will be coming out in the future. There's no point in, we do, well, for us,
we know ballpark when, based
on
a pattern. Even when they haven't announced it, they've been so consistent that we feel communicated with when they haven't said anything.
Yeah.
So if they change it, they didn't lie to us because they never told us.
Mm-hmm.
But if anybody asks, you and I already have prediction dates on patch 6.1.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see from just a scientific study, because we brought up 3 pillars: content cycle, PvP, and hardcore content. Now, Final Fantasy XIV, that second pillar, is supposed to be coming in 6.1, which we are estimating in around, March. I think March seems to be a reasonable enough bet at this point in time. No confirmed dates yet. But then essentially, if we ever end up getting if they take the deep dungeon system and turn it into, an equivalent of the M+, kind of system within 14,
or fractals, or any of the others. It doesn't have to be WoW specifically. They're not the only one with. Just because I know some people are sensitive to Mythic Plus, there are other positive challenge mode dungeon systems.
Yeah, I wish. That's why if they ever get one, it'd be nice, because then we can have a new word to use. And good point about bringing up fractals. I appreciate that.
Extremes,
like extreme dungeons.
Extreme plus.
Extreme E plus. Yeah, exactly.
Unreals. So Savage.
The idea that as those pillars kind of get fleshed out, does that complaint and frustration get leveraged, or is communication the real key? Ointment is the real key, antidote to any kind of bubbling up toxicity within any kind of like subgroup within a community. I mean, that's ultimately what this video is asking. So you guys let us know, obviously, what you think about this conversation and the points we brought up. Chris, what do you think?
I mean, I think all in all, there's always toxicity to be found in any community. And I think that the answer is to go focus somewhere that it's not. There are absolutely content creators that are not upset with Guild Wars at all right now and are having a blast, and are known for positivity and have remained positive. And so, you know, on the premise of what happens if there's toxicity in this community, that's where I think it's coming from, because there are people who I've enjoyed in the past that I found this weekend I had to turn their streams off because they were making my day a little worse. And like, that's not their fault. They're welcome to have those days, and you know, they're full-time content creators, so like everybody has those days, and I will go back to watching them again. But I was just like, there were other people on that were having a great day, and I think like many people, you know, I can just change to the channel that help shape my day into what I want mine to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, that's the topic that we wanted to bring to you guys today. Hopefully you enjoyed. Always weigh in with your thoughts below. Always curious to see what you guys think, especially as it relates to how you enjoy games, how you consume content, and what kind of communities do you find particularly enjoyable or that you tend to avoid at all costs. Chris, why don't you take us out?
Guys, we're going to go talk about Lost Ark, because once again, I really don't know that much about it, and I happen to have an expert sitting next to me. So stay tuned here and enjoy whatever game it is you're playing. Hopefully Guild Wars does have an expansion in February. End of Dragons. It should be like their Endwalker-ish, not kind of, but maybe. Could be worth checking out. We'll see you next time.
Take care.